The men of the USS Indianapolis had already completed one of the most secret missions of the Second World War. They had crossed the Pacific, carrying parts of the atomic bomb that would be dropped on Hiroshima. Most of the crew did not know exactly what was inside the guarded crates. They only knew the cargo was important, the orders were urgent, and the ship had to move fast. They delivered it. And then, on the way to their next assignment, the Navy lost them. In the early darkness of July 30th, 1945, the Indianapolis was alone in the Philippine Sea. No escort, no warning that a Japanese submarine was waiting near her route. Just a heavy cruiser moving through black water, hundreds of miles from safety, with almost 1,200 sailors and Marines aboard. Shortly after midnight, the Japanese submarine I-58 fired a spread of torpedoes. 2 of them struck. In a matter of seconds, the Indianapolis was torn open. Fire, steam, fuel, and seawater rushed through the ship. Men were thrown from their bunks. Others were trapped below. Lights went out. Passageways filled with smoke. The bow was shattered. The ship began to list. There was almost no time to understand what had happened. There was almost no time to survive it. About 12 minutes after the torpedoes hit, the USS Indianapolis disappeared beneath the Pacific. Around 300 men went down with her. The rest, roughly 900 sailors and Marines, were left in the open ocean. At first, the night may have felt like the enemy. Men were in the water in darkness, many of them burned, cut, stunned, or coated in oil. Some had life jackets, some clung to debris, some found rafts. Many had nothing but the people beside them. But when the sun came up, the ocean became something else. It became heat. It became thirst. It became salt burning into wounds. It became the terrible knowledge that no rescue ships were coming over the horizon. The Indianapolis was not just any ship. She was a Portland-class heavy cruiser, a ship with a long record in the Pacific War. She had served President Franklin D. Roosevelt before the war. She had served as a flagship for Admiral Raymond Spruance. She had fought through island campaigns, earned 10 battle stars, and survived danger again and again. In March of 1945, off Okinawa, she had been hit by a kamikaze. The damage was serious enough to send her back to Mare Island in California for repairs. That damage, in a strange chain of timing and circumstance, put her in position for the secret mission that came next. On July the 16th, 1945, the Indianapolis left San Francisco Bay carrying components for Little Boy, the atomic bomb that would soon be used against Hiroshima. The mission was so secret that many of the men aboard did not know what they were protecting. They just knew the ship was under pressure to move quickly. She made a fast run to Pearl Harbor, then continued across the Pacific to Tinian. The cargo was delivered. The mission was a success. For the crew, that should have been the dangerous part. Instead, the danger was waiting after the delivery. From Tinian, the Indianapolis went to Guam. From Guam, she was ordered to Leyte in the Philippines, where she was to prepare for further duty. She sailed without a destroyer escort. Her captain, Charles B. McVay III, had command of a ship that was important, experienced, and vulnerable to submarines. The route looked routine enough to some of the people ashore who sent her across it, but the war was not over. Japanese submarines were still operating. A few days earlier, another American ship, USS Underhill, had been sunk in the broader region by a Japanese submarine attack. McVay was not given the full picture. He was told to zigzag at his discretion. Zigzagging was a defensive maneuver meant to make a ship harder to target. but it depended on visibility, sea conditions, speed, and the tactical situation. It was not a magic shield. And as submarine tactics changed during the war, it became less reliable than many people imagined. On the night of July 29th into July 30th, the Indianapolis moved through the Philippine Sea. Visibility had been poor. The ship was not zigzagging at the moment the submarine found her. Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, aboard I-58, spotted the cruiser and attacked. The torpedoes did what torpedoes are built to do. They did not just make holes. They broke systems. They broke compartments. They broke time. The Indianapolis sank so quickly that many lifeboats could not be launched. Radio distress calls, if sent or received, did not bring immediate help. In the chaos, survival came down to whatever a man could reach, whatever group he could stay with, and whether his body could endure what came next. By morning, the survivors were scattered across the sea. Some groups were large, some were small. Some men were alone. There was very little fresh water. Drinking seawater made the thirst worse and could lead to delirium. The sun burned them during the day. At night, the ocean pulled heat from their bodies. Wounds became infected. Oil clung to skin and eyes and mouths. Men hallucinated. Some slipped away from their groups and were never seen again. And there were sharks. This part of the story has often been told in a way that turns horror into spectacle. The truth does not need exaggeration. The sharks were real. The attacks were real. Survivors remembered them for the rest of their lives, but the ocean was killing men in more than one way. Injury, exposure, dehydration, saltwater poisoning, exhaustion, and panic were all part of the same ordeal. The men in the water did not know the worst part. They did not know that on land and aboard other ships, no one had sounded the alarm in time. The Indianapolis was expected at Leyte. When she did not arrive, a chain of missed signals, assumptions, suspended reporting habits, and confusion kept the absence from becoming an emergency. In war, a missing ship should have pulled attention toward itself. In this case, it slipped through the cracks. So the survivors waited. They waited through the first day. They waited through the second. They waited as groups drifted apart. They waited as voices became weaker. They waited as men who had survived the sinking began to die in the water. On August 2nd, a PV-1 Ventura patrol aircraft was flying a routine mission. The pilot, Lieutenant Wilbur Chuck Gwynn, was not searching for the Indianapolis. He was not following a distress call that had brought him directly to the scene. He was in the air for another purpose. Then he noticed something below, an oil slick. At first he thought it might be evidence of a Japanese submarine. He descended to investigate, and then he saw them. Men. Not wreckage. Not a submarine. Men in the water. After nearly 4 days adrift, the survivors of the Indianapolis had finally been seen. Gwynn radioed for help. Aircraft began arriving. Life rafts and supplies were dropped. Then, Lieutenant R. Adrian Marks came in with a PBY Catalina flying boat. From the air, Marks saw what was happening below. Men were injured. Men were exhausted. Some were being attacked. Supplies dropped from above were not enough. Standing orders said not to land a flying boat in the open ocean. The sea could destroy the aircraft. The landing could kill the crew. Once down, the plane might never take off again. Marks chose to land anyway. He brought the Catalina down onto the rough water and began pulling survivors aboard. The aircraft filled. Men were tied to the wings. The plane became a floating lifeboat, no longer a usable aircraft, but alive with men who would have died without it. Surface ships raced toward the area. One of them was USS Cecil J. Doyle. That night, her commander used a searchlight in a way that could have made his own ship a target. He aimed it upward, reflecting light off the clouds, so men still floating in the dark could see that help was coming. Imagine that sight. You have been in the water for days. You have watched the horizon stay empty. You have watched friends disappear. You have tried not to drink the ocean. You have tried not to sleep. You have tried not to think about what is moving beneath you, and then the clouds begin to glow. Not sunrise, not lightning. A signal. Someone is coming. By the time the rescue was over, only 316 men from the Indianapolis were alive. The accepted modern count is 1,895 men aboard, 316 survivors, and 879 dead. It remains one of the greatest losses of life from a single ship at sea in the history of the United States Navy. But the tragedy did not end when the survivors reached hospitals. The Navy needed answers. The public would need answers. Families would need answers. And in the months after the sinking, Captain Charles B. McVay III became the center of a controversy that would last for decades. McVay had survived the sinking. He was one of the last to leave the ship and one of the men rescued from the water. Later, he was court-martialed. He was charged over the loss of the Indianapolis, and although he was cleared of one charge, he was convicted for hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag. To many survivors, that conviction was wrong. They knew the ship had been sent across dangerous water without the full warning its captain deserved. They knew zigzagging might not have saved them. Even Hashimoto, the Japanese submarine commander who sank the ship, later indicated that zigzagging would not have changed the outcome of his attack. McVay carried the burden for the rest of his life. Survivors and families kept fighting to clear his name. Decades later, the case drew attention from historians, veterans, lawmakers, and even a young student whose school project helped bring the story back into the national conversation. In 2000, Congress passed language stating that McVay should be exonerated for the loss of the Indianapolis. The following year, that language was entered into his official Navy record. It came too late for McVay, but it mattered to the men who had survived, because the story of the USS Indianapolis is not only a story about a ship sinking, it is a story about secrecy, timing, and bad assumptions. It is a story about how a mission can be completed perfectly and still lead men into disaster. It is a story about hundreds of people doing everything they can to stay alive while the world does not yet know they are missing. And it is a story about memory. The men of the Indianapolis are often remembered by the numbers. 12 minutes to sink, nearly 4 days before discovery, 195 aboard, 316 survivors, 879 dead. Those numbers matter, but each number was a person. Someone had been writing letters home. Someone had been counting the days until the war ended. Someone had survived Okinawa and thought the worst was behind him. Someone had delivered a secret cargo without knowing how much history was inside it. Someone held on in the water because a friend was holding on beside him. And someone saw a light in the clouds and realized that the ocean had not taken everyone. The Indianapolis had completed her final mission. The men aboard had done what they were ordered to do. What happened after that became one of the darkest and most painful chapters in American naval history. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Deep Water for more true stories of survival, disaster, and mystery at sea. These are not just shipwrecks. They are human stories. and they deserve to be remembered carefully. And I want to ask you this. When you look at the USS Indianapolis, what part of the story hits hardest? The sinking, the days in the water, the delayed rescue, or what happened to Captain McVay afterward?